Hello everyone. My name is Joel Obermeyer. I am the executive director of Widen the Circle. I want to also thank Dan Wolf for being here and for giving us a window into your work. Hold on one second. Thank you for joining us for the conversation with Dan Wolf. In just a few minutes, Dan will reflect on his inspiring work, and it really is very inspiring. But before I turn to Dan, I want to give just a very quick introduction to what we do at Widen the Circle for anybody who might not know. There is a war on memory going on in this country and also in Germany. And that really has made our work more important than ever. Manipulating memory is the path toward more bigotry, more hate, and more injustice, because it's impossible to deal with bigotry, hate, and injustice if you don't tell the truth. Very obvious statement, but nonetheless very relevant right now. Widen the Circle pushes back on this. Our big idea is that Widen the Circle confronts long-standing injustice rooted in racism, anti-Semitism, and attacks on historic memory and democratic values, both in the United States and Germany. We empower local remembrance activists, amazing people who expose legacies of persecution and use the lessons of history to bring communities together and promote healing. We have offices in the US and Germany, and we have 3 program areas. One is that we have a network of people, of remembrance activists doing amazing work all across Germany, more than 400 of them. We have an awards program to honor people doing that work in Germany. And we have a fellowship program that increasingly has been spreading our work to the United States. The fellowship program connects people doing this kind of work in the US to one another and to people in Germany. And we are working on building a network of remembrance activists across the US, much like we have in Germany, and connecting them both. People who are part of this work of ours are people like the ones who are working on the Underground Railroad and memorializing the Underground Railroad, or the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, or someone like Dan Wolf. The fellowship is a year-long program anchored by a year-long program that includes an immersive educational experience in Germany for about a week. It's followed by a set of experiences that turn the fellows into sort of a brain trust to help one another make progress, collaborate, and gain inspiration. And the truth is, fellows who spend a year in this program very intensively then become members of a broader network that we have of remembrance activists all across the United States. So that's what we do. I might say a couple words at the end, but that's all you're going to hear from Widen the Circle stuff, because I think the more interesting thing is talk to Dan. So I would like to turn to today's guest. Dan, thank you for being patient. We're very excited to have you. Dan Wolf joins us from the San Francisco Bay Area. Dan, I'm just going to read a quick little bio because then I know I will get it right. Dan is an award-winning playwright, director, actor, and educator whose groundbreaking work bridges history, memory, and performance. Dan is the co-creator of Sound in the Silence, which we're going to hear quite a bit about, a transformative project that brings young people together at sites of historical trauma to explore remembrance through music, movement, theater, and art. His approach draws from his German Jewish heritage and connects performers to remembrance work in a deep and lasting way that creates unique emotional performances that leave a lasting impression on audiences and participants. Dan is also a member of Widen the Circle's 2025 Fellowship Program. Dan's main project, as I said before, is called Sound in the Silence. We're going to start with a short film, we hope, because this is Zoom, of course, that will give you a taste of that work, and I'd love to watch it now. Share, and
there we go.
Full screen.
We're in Pidesi prison, the place where the Pidesi experiment happened, and a lot of people, mostly like students and the young guys, were present here.
We have the project Sound in the Silence happening for the first time in a communist country with a communist team. And we are very glad to see so many young people here, and we are actually used to having young people developing artistic projects here because we do feel like art is the best way to convey such a difficult message that a Pitesh phenomenon or experiment is.
Sound in the Silence is a project where art and history meet, collide, and performance comes out of it.
Yeah, it's a multicultural remembrance project. and we use the locations where history happened, not only as a way to teach young people about history, but also as like prompts for making art, in a way, using the art to connect the past and the present, so these places mean something to them.
I think it's also like the connection also between art and history, that you can express the emotions and the historical events through art. A lot of kinds of art. I like that.
Thanks to this project, you can develop our characters and develop our emotions, develop how we look at how we will look at the history and future. And yeah, I think that's the great journey.
Just being young people with different cultures together and be free to express themselves. Mostly it's not possible with the words, but through the art it's something which gave them more space, more openness to really get out and say something what is very important for them.
Art is a bridge between people that connects us on, I think, a different level.
Come on, y'all. Get it to 5, 6, here we go.
We are here with smiles on our faces, different languages, cultures, and places. For a journey, we pack our suitcases, left our faces to look for the traces of history. To uncover this mystery, what's with this misery? Torture is visibly here. Let this be clear, we're facing our fears, holding back tears. Why? They were still kids, not older than us. Their spirits were crushed, their hope into dust. What can we do? Remember, don't let the memory rust.
1, 2,
what can we do? Remember, don't let the memory rust.
1, 2.
What can we do? Remember, don't let the memory rust.
Dan, great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So, and anyway, so now we've seen the film, and let's try and fill in some of the gaps here. Dan, you have a stage background. You went to performing arts school. You have a rap background. You started creating performances that used rap to make kind of stage plays. So can you talk briefly about how you got from that to Remembrance? It's not like the most obvious connection.
Yeah, it's definitely not an obvious pathway there. I mean, I started off as everybody else, trying to kind of follow this American dream of being a famous rapper and actor and entertainer. And somewhere in 1999, I say my creativity and my culture collided when I met this filmmaker from Hamburg. He reached out to me. His name was Jens Huckerida. He was not Jewish. He was the same age as my father. And I met him one time. He was coming to San Francisco because he was doing a research about a film, a documentary film he wanted to make about my family. And my first question was like, who's my family? Why is that important to you? And when I met him, I was 25. I was kind of trying to figure out who I was as an artist, as a person. And he told me about my great-grandfather and his brother, Ludwig and Leopold Wolf, known as the Gebrüder Wolf, the Brothers Wolf. They were famous performers in Hamburg, wrote over 600 songs, and one song was still so famous that you could stop people on the street and ask them to sing it, and they would sing it, but they didn't know who wrote it. And it turns out in 1938, the Nazis had basically like extracted the art from the artist, and they said that those Jewish songs were too German for Jews to sing anymore, and kind of the artist and the art were separated from each other. I knew my grandparents on both sides of my family escaped the Nazis. Mom's side is Polish, dad's side is German. Dad's side was Hamburg. This was the side that the man was coming from to tell me about. I knew they had escaped to Shanghai. I knew my mother's family had escaped via Siberia. And, you know, meeting Jens, we talked for about 10 minutes, and he told me all about his work. And within about 10 minutes, I knew I wanted to go kind of anywhere in the world with him, to do anything. And this was, I think, like the beginning of this shift, right? From focusing on being in this band, writing these plays, trying to get to New York, trying to get record deals, all that kind of stuff, into something else. I didn't know what it was at the time, but clearly looking back, this is the pivotal shifting moment.
Wow. And can you talk a little bit about how you came up with Sound of Silence, or Sound in the Silence, excuse me?
Yeah.
And maybe we can start with where the name came from.
Yeah, so after I met Jens, so about 6 months before I met Jens, I found a letter from my grandfather, 42 pages long, typewritten to my sister and me. Started the day after my sister was born in 1977, and the last date was 1984 in the letter. So he spent 7 years trying to tell me who he was, why they left Germany, why they escaped, and why we were in America. And this was as a writer and as an actor and as an artist, I was like, oh, this is something I have to do. In fact, my dad walked into the room with this manila envelope and said, like, this is your next play when he gave me this letter. And so I wrote this play called Stateless. I also found this passport, his foreigner's resident certificate, his kind of daily pass that he had to have in Shanghai. And on it, it said stateless. And there was something about this term that really connected me to him. And so I wrote this play, and we performed it in 2006 in San Francisco at Intersection for the Arts. And then we took it to Hamburg, Germany, and then we took it to Berlin and to Ravensbrück. And this is where Sound in the Silence happened. Sound in the Silence started to be born. The idea really came from this idea that in all of our families, when we talked to our grandparents or when we tried to figure out the past, or even when we didn't try to figure out the past, there was silence. I remember asking my grandfather about the past. I remember asking my grandmother, and I just remember silence. Maybe it's kind of in my brain a little bit more dramatic because that's where my head goes, but I always say that it's a silence that taught me never to ask again. And so as after we were performing in Ravensbrück, which is kind of about 60 kilometers east of Berlin, I was sitting by this old crematorium on the site, kind of reflecting. We were there for 4 days, actually, doing hip hop theater workshops and performances with people from the area. And this group of young kids would come every day by bus. And I asked, why are these students coming by bus? And they said, oh, it's a 7-day trip. They go to 4 concentration camp memorial sites in 7 days. They go on the tour, they eat pasta in the canteen, and then they get on the bus without any ability to discuss or kind of unpack this history. And these young girls were sitting next to me after coming out of the crematorium, and they started playing Rihanna on their cell phone. And I remember thinking, is this okay to play pop music at a memorial site? And because it's quiet there, it's quiet at these places. And I thought, no, no, they have to. This is how they're dealing with it. And then I thought, oh, there's sound in all of this silence. And so I kind of talked to Jens and I said, hey, I have an idea for a new project called Sound and the Silence. And over time, it evolved to Sound in the Silence.
Got it. And can you maybe describe briefly how it works? Like maybe give an example and sort of describe it a little bit. We certainly saw kind of like the feel, the vibe in the film, but anyway, give us a little more.
Yeah, so the project, I'll call the version that you saw in the film the most robust version of the project. There's a few kind of offshoots and different editions of the project. Now we've been doing it for 15 years. 2026 will be our 15-year anniversary. So in that most robust version, we go to a place, we spend about 9 days in and around a location. So this location you saw in the video was Pitești. It was a prison in a small town called Pitești in Romania. And it was our first edition where we did a non-Second World War topic. We were really focused on the communist regime, Ceausescu's communist regime at that time. So we spent 2 days or a day and a half in Bucharest, and we learned kind of call it the 30-foot view, 30,000-foot view of the idea. So we learn about the history, the bigger context of what's happening at the time. And then we go, so those are our guided tours. It's the beginning of our project. It's the education part, because I say it's the 3 E's: education, experience, expression. And so the education part is one part in the city, doing guided tours, learning the big ideas of the history. And then we move to Pitești, which is a smaller town, which is where anti-communists were arrested. University students were arrested and forced to torture each other. They wanted to turn the persecuted into the perpetrator. That was the whole plan of this Pitești experiment. And so then we spent about a day and a half in Pitești, working again with the history, the historical guided tours, historical workshops. And then kind of halfway through that 9-day process, we kind of shift into the performative aspect. And so then a group of artists kind of interface with the educators and take over the workshops. We're doing workshops, both historical and art performance on site. So then we spend about 2.5 or 3 days really just diving into specific performance modalities, whether it's rap and creative writing or vocals or dance theater or whatever else is there. And we develop material over this middle section. And then the last part of the project is really kind of how we put everything together, and we create this site-specific performance that happens on location in the places where the history happened. And we walk the audience like a performance installation walk through the place. We do not separate the artist from the audience. We create this real relationship. We put the audience in the immersive experience of being in the place and in the history, because we want to imply that everybody is connected and everybody is responsible for this history. And yeah, so the performance then happens. In Pitești, we did one performance. Sometimes we get to do 2 performances. But yeah, it's
Who are the participants? Is it typically people local or from, various parts of Europe, or like who is it?
Yeah, so we've had anybody from like 13 all the way to about 65 as our participants in the various editions. And what you saw, it was students from Romania, from Germany, from the Czech Republic, and from Poland. And so typically a teacher is asked to apply. And once the teacher and the school is selected from 4 different countries, those teachers are tasked with finding 7 students to bring with them. So in this case, it's about, those students were like 15 to 18, kind of, let's say like young juniors and old seniors in high school. But we've worked with university students, we've worked with, middle school students, we've worked with volunteers from around the world. So yeah, but in that edition, those were all high school students.
Gotcha. Very impressive. Can I ask you to talk just very briefly about the kind of impact participation has on these students or young people?
Yeah, well, what I think I'm realizing over time is that we call the first phase of the project, 99 through 2006, really like the Wolf Brothers project. And, they would always say to me like, oh, Dan, you're the protagonist. And I had this transformational experience. And what I've realized is, as I've extracted myself and my personal narrative from the content and context of the project, those students are having a similar transformative experience. These are students who are not performers. They are mostly, history students, or, they want to be diplomats in the future. They are not considering themselves artists. So what happens is we break them out of the classroom and we create this real link, a personal connection link between the history of the places and their own personal narratives. So all of a sudden these stories that they've read in books or seen in movies or just been talked about become kind of tangible and 3-dimensional for them. And they're able to really deeply create a path of empathy from who they are as a young person to who these young people or these historical kind of figures are. And so what I'm hoping is that as they grow and have changed from this project, that it becomes a seminal experience in their life. And that maybe, if they're a diplomat in the future, maybe when they have to make a big decision, they will think about this intercultural, intergenerational creative experience they've had, and it can help shape who they are. But we've had students who have gone on to be art historians, or found their creative self, or went into the army, or want to be teachers. That's the other part. Like, how can we reshape how a young person is thinking about educating in the future?
Yeah, interesting. So I'm going to ask you a few more questions here. I'm going to leave lots of time for Q&A because there's a million different directions you could go from this. Dan, can you talk a little bit about, I understand you're sort of planning, thinking about extending this kind of work to the United States. Can you briefly talk about that?
Yeah, so we're in the process of creating a nonprofit called Sounds of Remembrance. and it's really about an organization dedicated to unifying, expanding, and sustaining the work that we've been doing for the past 15 years. Um, I think the first inkling was every time I came home from Europe, since I've been going there since 2000, multiple times a year, doing this project or doing this remembrance work, I come back here and I think, how can I do this work in the States? How can what I'm doing there transfer to the issues and challenges of culture and identity and racism and anti-Semitism and xenophobia and historical whitewashing and all the things that we are and have been experiencing in the States. So I've done a few pilots. I worked with a school in Oakland. I guess the main challenge about doing it in the States so far, I've only been able to interface with, let's say, residencies in schools during the school day, as opposed to this project is kind of an out of class experiential education project that happens and we're there. That's all we're doing for the time that we're there, as opposed to having to go in and interface with a 50-minute language arts class or a 50-minute history class. So we've done some pilot programs. We did one in 2018 with a school in Oakland. They were learning about the history of Blacks in America. And then we interfaced with them during the portion of the Black Panthers because it is a location-based project. It's site-specific. We need these historical locations as our kind of textbooks in a way, so we can do a rigorous dive into the work. That was really interesting. We used political speeches and political protest chants. I've worked with middle school students in Mill Valley when they're reading Elie Wiesel's Night, and we did rap verses that connected their experiences to Elie's experience. Finding Widen the Circle and finding Obermeyer Foundation was a big light bulb for me and really has kind of expanded my network. I came to the summer forum last year in 24 before I was a fellow and kind of talked to as many people as I can.
This is the forum that we run for our network in Berlin each June, pretty much. Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
Yeah, and I heard Ashley Rogers talking about what was happening at the Whitney Plantation Memorial Site, and I thought, okay, this would be an amazing location to do the work. So I reached out and we had a conversation and been trying to raise money to do it there. So how does it extend beyond Second World War narratives and communist narratives and anti-Semitism narratives? And how do we start looking at locations of the enslaved in America? How do we look at different cultural, communal issues? And how can the project be a conduit to build community, to create healing, to create conversations, to create empathy? And I think that, Widen the Circle is a really important next step for me in this process of figuring out really holistically and authentically how to do the work here in the States.
Yeah. And it sounds like the kind of places and histories that you're looking at in the United States tend to more likely be racial history rather than, Jewish or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Although, with Carol's location in Pittsburgh, right?
I mean, the tree of life. Yeah.
Life. I mean, I think it's important to look at US history and to look at, I believe the best nonprofits are problem solvers. And so how I'm asking myself, how can the project really be a conduit for solving problems? And how can we bring the right people together to use the process to help that goal?
Great. One last question, and then I think we'll open up for Q&A. I think. Can you talk a little bit about the realization you told me you had in Berlin as part of our fellowship, that kind of aha moment about what that helped you think about what you need to do in the United States?
Yeah. So, I mean, meeting so many amazing social justice remembrance workers from the South and the deep questions that they had about how the work we were doing in Europe translated to the work that they're deeply engaged in the United States, made me understand and realize why maybe I haven't been able to make as much headway with work in the States. I've spent the last 20 plus years going to Europe and spending time in Europe. And I need to put energy into building relationships here in America. going to the South, spending time, putting my energy into being a part of community, asking questions, listening, learning, building deep relationships. Again, authenticity is deeply important. And to be quite honest, the challenge is that, in Europe, I'm an American Jew. And because of racial identity politics in America, I'm a white guy. I'm a Jew still, but I'm a white guy. That's not what I call myself. That's just the structure and the system that we are engaged in here in the country. And so understanding that, I have to understand how to, again, build authentic, deep relationships with people so that trust can be built, so that we can, again, that the work can help solve problems. And I really believe, Questlove is a great drummer from The Roots, great documentary filmmaker, musicologist. He talked about, in the early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, the reason why, The Roots and Erykah Badu and D'Angelo and Tribe Called Quest and all these great hip hop artists thrived was because they didn't thrive in a vacuum. They thrived in a movement, in a community of like-minded thinkers and workers and artists. And finding, Widen the Circle really feels like there's a movement here for us all to do this work together. And so what is my responsibility in that movement, and how can I bring my particular historical background and kind of expertise that I've learned in Europe, how can I bring that back here? And the realization is really, I have to spend more time engaging with people and showing up, because it's about showing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you for being so candid.
Yeah.
I think that this is a good, we've talked in a bunch of different directions here. Obviously your work is really fascinating. I think this is a good time to go for questions and answers. Rebecca, I see you in the corner of my eye. Do we have some questions? And I guess I would just say, people who have questions, feel free to put them in the chat right now. We'll go from there.
Great. All right. Well, first of all, thanks, Dan. I can add myself to the spotlight for a second.
Yeah.
So thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Dan. We have a number of questions. I'm going to start with one that was sent to me directly, so I don't know if that person wants to remain anonymous. Can you name a few of the places where you have staged a performance of Sound in the Silence? And who is typically the audience? What kind of impact does it usually have on them?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so we've kind of been all over the place, mainly Central and Eastern Europe. So last month we were in Warsaw, looking at the uprising of 1944, and we were in this place called Pruszków, which was the place where the Warsavians were deported before they were sent to slave labor, 650,000 citizens of Warsaw. We've done it at the House of the Wannsee Conference, which is the house that in 1941, 1942, I'm mixing my, that the Nazis met, 15 high-ranking officials met. They said they had, a meeting with breakfast after, and they basically decided to switch from one bullet per dead person to industrialized murder. So this was the room where that happened. We've been in Croatia at the Jasenovac Memorial, where Jews and Muslim Bosnians were killed right on the border of Bosnia. We've been in Kaunas, which is in Lithuania, which was a Russian fort. And then it's where it became a death camp where the Jewish community of Kaunas, Lithuania, were murdered. We were at Auschwitz, where we learned the story of two Slovakian Jews who escaped, and we went into the mountains then of Slovakia, and we performed in the mountains. Yeah, and I think the question about who is in the audience is really, really important and really always an interesting one. I'll also say we're at Ravensbrück. In Ravensbrück Memorial Site, I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. They are a major, major partner in the expansion of this project. And Matthias Heil, the education director there, has been a friend and a really deep thinker about how do we bring performance and audience together. And I always say that the audience that shows up is the right audience to be there. In Pitești last year, 24, it was mostly students from the area. And in fact, one of those students groups was so excited that they applied themselves and were admitted to the project we just did in Warsaw last month. I would say it's historians, it's students, it's teachers, it's members of the community there. You know, I still think there is a lot of silence in these communities, and I think that people are still afraid of this topic and afraid to explore who maybe their families were in relation to the topic. But the goal is really to, you want people there, and I think it's quite moving for them. I think there's nothing more impressive than showing up at a formal memorial site and being asked to, not just being talked at, but being asked to be a part of the project as an audience member, as somebody who has to walk in the footsteps of the path of the locations and feel the rocks crunching under your feet and go into the old rooms and use your senses. So I think it's been quite moving for them and quite touching for them. There's something that we get that there's something that happens when you're in these places and you can use really, really like a real small movements and a real conservation of, you don't have to do too much, I guess is what I'm saying. You have these words, you have these young people, you have audiences witnessing, and then you have the narrative of the place, and that together is a really touching and moving experience, I think, for all who witness it.
Thank you. I'm going to move to a question that's a little more tactical. So I'm combined two actually. So one is Stateless in libraries or available for purchase if people want to be able to see it? And the second is maybe about how you're approaching things. Have you connected with Reboot, Arnie Winshaw asks, and Canvas?
I know the people, I'll second part first and then back to the first part. I know the people in Reboot and I know the people in Canvas, and I've put my work in front of them. I'm not 100% sure if they're interested in the type of work that I do. They are mostly interested in the entertainment industry and supporting that. So I'm open. I'm definitely always willing to talk to folks. But this is a very particular type of work, right? And the right people, like I said, the right people come to it to witness it, the right people engage with it, and the right people will help fund it, I think, in the future. But I'm open to Reboot and I'm open to Canvas. As far as Stateless goes, that's a great question. It's not published, but it is, I have a page on my website that has the video. The video is on YouTube, so you can feel free to watch it there. I would love for some theater company or some young actors, it's a two-handed play, you know, some young actors to take on the play and produce it in the future. I would love that. And I'm totally open. You can contact me through my website if you know anybody who wants to produce it, and I will send you the script. But the best case to see it is on my website, and it's on my YouTube page as well.
Excellent. Well, we'll share your website again towards the end of the event so folks can check that out. Anya asks, how much information, historical information, is typically needed for the students to be able to perform the way that they do so?
Yeah, I say the more the better. I really think it's, you know, this isn't us just showing up for a few hours at a memorial site and then like dancing and rapping and singing. You know, it's a real, I have more respect for it. And it's a real rigorous dive into the history of the places. So I'd say the more the better. I think in the best case scenarios, we've had a guided tour matched with a historical workshop that puts things in practice. You know, one of my guiding principles of the work that we do is borrowed from Picasso, which is you have to learn the rules like a pro to break them like an artist. And I really believe that comes from my theatrical work, which is this dramaturgical work, which is you have to understand the world of the play and understand all the nuances of the content and the history and the social practice and the psychology of the world of the play before you can start living in it. So that I've really applied to this process. So yeah, guided tours, pre-trip work also, like, can you read a book before you come about the history? Can you watch a film before you come about the history? The more information you have about the place swirling in your head, when we switch from the kind of education piece to the expression piece, you really can draw from all of these kind of disparate ideas in your body and in your mind. And I think that some of the great work comes from that. And I really think the more we know about these places, the more permission we have to kind of break the rules like a pro and to tell and to connect our stories to their stories. So it's meaningful, because when it's meaningful to us, then it's meaningful to the audience.
Thank you.
Let me throw one more in. Dennis Hirschfelter asks, how can social media, streaming services, and the like amplify what you were doing, or can they?
Yeah, it's also a great question. I mean, the streaming services, so, my hope and my goal is to create a documentary film about the first edition that I do here in the States. And I think that's a real big opportunity to tell the history of the project, what has happened in Europe before, and also to document what we do when we come here to the States. And that documentary, at least in my mind, conceptually, is geared towards, let's say, film festivals and streaming services. I mean, I just saw this incredible documentary the other night called Among Neighbors, and it's like, if it could be that well done, there's a big possibility there. And I think there's great work going on social media. Right now in the States, it's just me. So the hope in the future is that social media can play a part. I do as much as I can in my own streams, to document, and on the Patreon to document like what I'm doing, where I'm going. But it's a full-time job. And I think that it is a great avenue and venue, but you can't just think of it as like a place where you slap a bunch of stuff. You have to create real content for that stream of consciousness. And so to be able to do it well, I need more partners, I need more funding, I need more people. But it's a really important place. You need the project always has good photography, good documentation, good photography. You saw the film. So every edition, we've done about 20 editions. Every edition has a short film attached to it, which you can also see on my YouTube page. And so documentation is a deeply important part of the project. And then how to push that out is a big question that I'm still wrestling with.
Right. Mark asks, how have you changed your approach since you started this work? And how have you changed? I think that means, and how have you changed?
Great. Hey, Mark, good to hear from you. Yeah, I mean, I think everything has changed since this project has come into my life. I mean, it really, yeah, it changed who I am and who I want to be and how I see myself. I really, in a weird way, or not in a weird way, it's in a lucky way, it's kind of my life's work. And so the process has changed based on the people who have touched it. And I would say, like, I had an idea mainly to bring artists to a memorial site and make a piece of art, a performance. And it was Jens who changed it first, who said, no, we should do that, but we should add young people. Excuse me, we should add young people and use it as a way to teach young people about the past. He already was playing with this idea of new forms of remembrance. So when I brought him this idea, he was like, he saw where it could go. So that was really the first change. And I think that taught me, I'm a collaborative artist and I'm open and I'm very interested in learning and growing. And so that really put in practice what would happen if I just listened to the people around me while I'm doing the work. And so, yeah, so that was one big change. Another big change was with Matthias at the memorial site in 2018. We started to work not just with silent locations, but with with real people. We started to work with 4 survivors at the memorial site. Unfortunately, 3 of them have passed away at Ravensbrück.
You said Matthias, do you mean the House of Wannsee conference? Or
No, I mean, sorry, Matthias Heil at the Ravensbrück memorial site.
Ravensbrück. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So he really decided, he said, hey, because we did the main version of the project in 2017 there. And he said, hey, I have this idea. We have a generations forum where we bring survivors and they get to speak with these volunteers who are here. They spend 4 days with these volunteers, talking with them, two different survivor talks, but then also time to sit with them and walk with them on the water and to drink wine with them and to tell jokes with them. And with Emmy Arbel, who's one of my favorites, to smoke cigarettes with them, and eat ice cream with them. And he said, we do this every summer. What if we did Sound in the Silence meets the Generations Forum? And that created a whole new edition of the project that we've been doing with Ravensbrück since 2018. All through the pandemic, really taking these 4 women under our wings and kind of adopting them and making them our grandmothers and our friends. And it's really that's changed a lot. Matthias also suggested, Matthias Heil, we used to kind of just say, which group do you want to be in? And he said, oh, what if we gave all the participants a chance to try each workshop? So now we do this round robin, and they each get to try the workshop and then get to make an informed decision which artists they want to work with for the rest of the week. My Kat and Sean, who you saw in the video, I've been working with Kat since 2016 and Sean since 2018. And their participation in the project and their questions and the way they challenge me and the way they push me and the way we have these really powerful, deep discussions about the work, because they're excellent artists and they want the art to be excellent all the time, has changed me. So there's fingerprints from everybody who's been a part of it in the past and everybody who will be a part of it in the future, that it will continue to evolve and change.
I love that. Dan, we have a couple questions about the students who work with you. I'm going to combine them. So one is, what kind of response have you seen from the kids? Lenore said the project has a tremendous potential to move and to confuse them. So we'd love to hear that. And then Lisa asked, are there any students whose stories or journeys have stayed with you?
Yeah. Okay. So, I will say that, I mean, there's a lot getting thrown at them, right? There's a lot getting thrown at them. Sometimes I think too much. Sometimes I think it's a lot to take in a little amount of time. In our last edition in Warsaw, in about 72 hours, we went to the Warsaw Uprising Museum, the Warsaw Museum. We did a guided tour of Warsaw. They did Photoplasticon in Warsaw. They went to the Pitesh Memorial. They walked around the Pitesh site. And these are like 5, 6 different guided tours in a 72-hour time period. They were done, right? So there is some pushback sometimes, right? We force them in a way to intermingle with each other across cultures. So they're in mixed groups, they're in mixed rooms, sleeping with people. And this year they really pushed back and said, like, my social battery is done. Like, I need a space for myself. And I thought that was really powerful that they pushed back against it. And it made the work hard. It made the transition from the historical part to the education part really deeply challenging, or to the art part really challenging. But we got there by the end. There's always a transformative moment. It just happened a lot later this last time. Usually they come and they're terrified because we're like, hey, it's Monday. Good to meet you. By the way, on Saturday, we'll be performing at a former concentration camp memorial. And they're like, wait, what? And then we have to remind them, just trust us, just trust us. And they always laugh at me because I have that like American optimism, passion, energy. They're like, Dan, you're just like telling us we can do it. And I'm like, well, because I know you can and you will. You have no choice. You're here. But so there's always that confusion around like, wait, how do I get here? Also, I forget in a lot of times that this is their first experience of this. So the emotional weight of the places, for us, the artists, were kind of lucky in a certain way, because come Wednesday, we shift our focus and we've got to get art done. We've got to get writing done. We've got to get something created so we can present something, because we have a lot of pressure on us, because it's not a cheap week. to produce. And so we can, in a way, we have built a practice of how do we separate ourselves at a certain point from the emotional content. But they don't. So that heaviness of the place is also pretty strong.
Dan,
I'm
if
forgetting
you,
the second
well, I'm
part
going
of
to
it.
add one component actually also from Lenore, who talks about how her daughter went to Poland and saw some of these camps, and there wasn't a follow-up period. So actually, I think that's a great question. Is there any, after the week that they spend, is there a follow-up, a place where they can continue to reflect on the experience together?
We're very lucky because we have this kind of integration specialist with us. We have a role now where the job is early in the week to create trust, and later in the week a reflective space. So they have multiple times in the opening and closing circles throughout the week to reflect and express kind of what's going on and what's challenging for them in a place that doesn't have the artists and doesn't have their teachers. It's kind of their own little place, but it's a guided, really facilitated space for them. Social media has been a lovely place to stay in contact with them. Part of the goal of building the Sounds of Remembrance organization is to create a series of networks, and an alumni network is one of them. I would love to give space for people to stay connected to the project, to join the project in different ways in the future. I've had a lot of amazing conversations with the youth over the years as they've come back. We did Warsaw once, and then we came back again, and this one young man went with me to the airport and just basically told me how, like, who he's become since the project, who he was during the project, and who he's become. But there's nothing formal yet of a way to keep this kind of unpacking going. Our hope is that, I mean, again, the social media connections are there, so I have so many conversations with so many of the participants, but there's nothing formal, unfortunately, set up for them yet.
Let me just jump in for a second. Dan has been nice enough to offer to stick around a little bit past the hour here. For those who have additional questions, I can see there's a bunch of questions still in the chat that we haven't gotten to. So what I was going to do was maybe kind of wrap up the event a little bit so that those people who have to leave by the end of this hour can go on their way. We totally understand people have busy schedules. But again, Dan will stick around, and we do see a bunch of questions there, and we definitely can get to them. So let me just say thank you, Dan, for this window into your work. There's a lot of complexity there. There's a lot of richness there. I feel like we sort of scratched the surface in a good way, but there's a lot more to be learned. And I'm just going to very briefly, before we wrap up, put on my executive director hat. Widen the Circle raises money to support this important work of kind of connecting remembrance activists and empowering them. And I would be so grateful if you in the audience today would consider investing in this work. I encourage people who are curious about Widen the Circle to go to our website, widenthecircle.org, and there's a donate link up at the top right. Also, I'd like to give you a very quick quick reminder. On December 10th, we will have another event, this time with a woman named Susanna Franke of the Schalker Fan Initiative. This is an initiative, an Obermeyer Award-winning initiative that was organized by the fans of the Bundesliga soccer team, Schalke 04, excuse me. The organization has been a pioneer in countering right-wing extremism among soccer fans. And they do remembrance work, really good remembrance work. They also do work with refugees. And they reach members of the community who are often not reachable, through other programs. So I'm looking forward to a really good conversation. Suzanne's really super committed and been involved in this work for quite a long time. So with that in mind, those of you who want to stick around, please do. But those who can't, thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Dan, for your insights and your explanations, and for all the interesting questions. Thanks very much. And what we'll do is we'll just pause for about 30 seconds. So everybody who wants to head out can head out, maybe 15, 20 seconds. And then we can go back to the questions that we have. So thank you, everyone. All right. Thanks, Billy. No worries. So maybe now we'll just continue with some questions. I hope Elaine has been able to stick around. I see you, Elaine, there, so that's good. And the question you asked, I'm just going to make sure I think I've got it right, which is basically, is how people lived a part or a big part of your project, as opposed to just looking at the history of how people died in a place, or how do those streams fit into the work that you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, to answer that, I think it's baked. Yes, I guess the short answer is yes. It's baked into the initial moment when I met Jens, when he said, all Germans want to talk about 6 million people who died, but I want to work with what is living. And he said, that's why I want to work with you. And so I think that's a framing concept that lives deep in the work. And I think that as the project has grown, it is kind of why we spend these couple of days outside of the memorial sites. It's why we spend time in the city, so we can look at how life was before the war, during the war, and even after the war. Some of the most powerful moments are when we've had survivors come in and talk to the youth. When you hear their story, you learn how they live, because they genuinely or generally have an arc. An arc of their story which talks about what happened, who they were before the war, which I think is so deeply important, especially for the young people to remember. I also, we know these places are horrible, and we also know what happened there, and we can never change what happened there. But by being there in this different way, we have the opportunity to add a new layer of history. So we'll never change what happened there, but also you can reclaim space by creating joy and connection and listening and understanding in new ways at places where horrible things happened. So there's some life, I think, that goes into it. But I think, each project is dependent on the way that the historical educator presents the work. So some of them are better than others, to be quite honest. And so some of them really do include this kind of joyous life living component, and some of them don't. But I think it's important that we know that these are people, and they were people, and they have descendants, are still people, and that's all a bit, and that we are also people, and we are also engaging in this history, and that just if the as we go into this crazy moment in time now, if the kind of the mirror of history was tilted in a different way, we would be those people, and there'd be people talking about us in the future. And so we also have to know that who's next, in a way, is the question.
Thank you. Dan, I got another private question that I want to pose to you. So considering your heritage, how do you control your emotional feelings when continuously visiting these sites of, these horrific sites and the history there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can control them. I think that you have to just ride it, I think on one hand, I have a very strong muscle. But you do realize the night before you go to a memorial site what you're going to witness the next day. And it's never you have to remember that these aren't functioning, let's say, concentration camps. These are museums, right? These are highly curated museums where horrible things happened. And that there's some distance between the past and the present. I try to eat well. I try to stay healthy. I try to walk as much as I can. And then also, when those moments that inevitably come that are filled with deep emotion and sadness and pain, and when I see a name that I recognize, whether it's mine or someone in my family is on a wall somewhere, and I think, is this where my Polish great-grandfather was sent from? And I don't know, you'll never know that. I go there. I allow myself to be sad. I allow myself to just be in all of those emotional places, because I think it's more healthy to go there, and also to know that over time there's a muscle that you build, to do this work. And I think it's actually, I think the emotion is scarier in relation to what's happening in the present moment than what has, I mean, again, what has happened is awful, but the connection between the past and the present and the fear of the future is so prevalent now at these locations. I think that that's the most emotional spots. And then this idea of how, where else has this happened to other people also is a pretty heavy thought. So I think you just have to be honest with yourself. Yeah.
Okay. A more kind of practical question, if I can. Have films of any of your site-specific projects remained available at a site for continued educational use? It's from Tom.
Yeah, yeah. They're all online, so you can either here I'll put this in actually in the if you go to, so I guess if you go to my website or and click through to my YouTube page,
Mhm.
I have a new forms of remembrance playlist that's there, and it has all the videos from, or most of the videos. But here's the website for the partner in Warsaw, and on their website they have a lot of the videos as well as other materials. They put out a book, like a catalog for each edition, and so you can download the PDF of that as well. But they're all out there. They're all on the web.
And you can get there through the links that we put in chat. Yeah, great. That makes sense. Rebecca, do you have any more?
I think there's one more that I see, and if I've missed anything, then please feel free to speak up afterwards. Let me just get to it. And so, have you done sound in the silence with adults or older people? And actually, I think that question came up earlier. So I think Dr. Sibylla also asked that, and Craig asked that. So have you expanded to work with older people, or is it really just younger people at this point?
Yeah, I mean, through the work at Ravensbrück with their Generations Forum, they have a program every summer where they bring volunteers from around the world to work for, let's say, 4 weeks. They stay in the youth hostel and uh, they stay in the youth hostel and all of them are, yeah, as I said, like the oldest was, I think, 65. And so we've done the work, yeah, across. In fact, some of the Widen the Circle folks came to the project that we did in Ravensbrück last summer and were a part of it. And it's really interesting working with people who are used to be in control of their own lives and their own kind of yeah, what they will and won't do, right? Like we always talk about the idea of taking a healthy risk and putting yourself out there. And some people, the idea of a healthy risk is terrifying. And so we had one group once, then they were mostly in, over, let's say over 30, that had a really hard time in my rap workshop and really were resistant to the work because I think they felt deeply challenged by it. And so it works well with anybody who's willing to say yes and do something that is really outside of the box in a way. Um, I would love to work with more folks of all ages. I think 13 is the youngest we've had, and that's probably the youngest we should go. Um, I have a hope to kind of utilize the process in a longer term, kind of longer tail way and have something more like a more of a professional performance be the outcome that can then tour to places as a conversation starter. But yeah, I think all ages is fine. And then again, the survivors that we worked with, although they didn't work in our workshops, they came to our workshops quite a bit. And um, yeah, they were in their late 80s and 90s at the time when they were in the workshop.
That brings a smile to my face. That's cool. Very cool. Uh, I I think we're good, right? Yes, we're good. Okay. So Dan, thank you for taking the extra time with us. It was a
No
really
problem.
lovely session. Thank you for everyone who was able to join us over, for the extra time. Dan, we should make sure that you scan some of the really lovely comments on the chat. So many people very complimentary. It's a joy to see your growth as an artist and an educator. Anyway, a whole bunch of other comments there. So like really, really great. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You bet. Be well, everyone, and we'll hopefully see you on December 10th.